dears, today we are going to talk about ableism. But first, if you're new here, hello, my name is Sydney Zerlingo. I am autistic, disabled, and gay, and my favorite color is buttercup yellow. Pretty much all you need to know. I also really hate when YouTubers say to like, comment, share, and subscribe, so I won't say that. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to thank you for being willing to learn about ableism and being willing to change. I think as a culture, we tend to carry a lot of guilt for not being perfect all the time and for messing up and making mistakes. And I just want to say that you are taking the steps forward right now to make a difference, and that means a lot. What's done in the past is done, and you did the best with the information that you had, and now you're willing to learn and move forward, which is awesome. And I am really proud of you, and you should be really proud as well. I also find that a lot of activist things say, these things are all bad and you should work on yourself, without giving any information on how to work on oneself. So I'm going to attempt to add some of the things to do in this video so that it can actually feel productive and helpful as a useful tool. Hopefully, we'll see how it works. Don't get your expectations too high. But anyway, what is ableism? Ableism is the discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities or those perceived to have disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. And you may be thinking, well, I don't think that I'm superior to someone in a wheelchair. But ableism manifests in so many other ways too. It's both overt or obvious and covert, or hidden and internalized as a part of the system, just like every single other ism such as racism, classism, and sexism, just to name a few. Ableism is really pervasive because it is so often much less visible from someone's outward appearance. Even though 26%, 1 in 4 adults in the US have some type of disability, somehow people forget that we exist. Like, all the time. By the way, when I say disabled, I am including neurodivergent and chronically ill people into that category. I know that there's a whole neurodivergency isn't a disability thing, but the vast majority of disabilities are only disabling because the barriers society puts in the way of our success. Not to mention that disabled isn't a bad word. So let's all just work together on this one. It's the only way that we're gonna get rights. Okay, moving on. Some less obvious examples of ableism include telling a disabled or chronically ill person to try harder or get over it, judging people for atypical motions and ways of speech, judging people for childish interests, forcing us to push past our boundaries and limits, using slurs like retard or euphemisms like differently abled and special needs, thinking a person with a disability is overreacting or being high maintenance for stating their needs, telling someone not to call themselves disabled and not to let their disability define them. To clarify, disabilities are defining, but they also aren't all that we are. Discriminating against people who need accommodations or thinking that they're high maintenance for needing those accommodations. Comparing chronic and long-term disabilities to temporary short-term injuries or illnesses. For example, I had a headache once. I know what your life with chronic migraine is. Like, no. No longer inviting someone out because their disability has caused them to cancel a lot of plans previously, thinking you understand how a condition affects someone without listening to them and or researching it, avoiding interacting with someone because their disability or illness makes you feel uncomfortable, thinking that those with disabilities are a leech on the system, calling a setting a safe space without having accessibility in mind when you're creating it, thinking that all disabilities are visible, thinking that using prepared text is less trustworthy, assuming that somebody is lazy, unmotivated, or not trying hard enough to get better, assuming that because somebody is out of the house, smiling and laughing, etc., that they must be better, or that things are easy, or that they're faking their disability, believing that ableism is less toxic and harmful than racism, sexism, classism, etc., speaking over disabled people, treating us like children and or making us your pet project, thinking someone is using a diagnosis for attention or assuming somebody is faking an invisible disability, ignoring the disability or pretending it doesn't exist, toxic positivity, only tolerating us when we seem to have our disability under control to save you from dealing with the anxiety and the unknown that is living a disabled life. Liking and sharing inspiration porn, which is the portrayal of people with disabilities as inspirational solely or in part on the basis of their disability. In general, a disabled person doing something cool is inspirational. A disabled person simply existing and doing nothing particularly cool, not inspirational. But we'll get into this in another video at some point. Thinking disabled individuals aren't and can't be intimate. Fun fact, we also have sexuality. Thinking spoken language is superior. Thinking productivity measures a person's worth, expecting us to be ridiculously talented or have savant-like abilities that make up for our disability. Thinking that so-called high-functioning autism or Asperger's is superior. Thinking that episodic illness means sometimes ill and sometimes not ill, rather than a gradient between mildly sick and super sick that it actually is. Yes, it is possible to be sick all the time. Welcome to my life. Not believing us when we say how much pain that we're in or how exhausted we are, and countless more things that I can't even think of. And there's this huge problem that I've noticed time and time again where people say, yeah, it's totally fine that you're autistic. I love that. And they love that I have a deep interest in linguistics and that I'm honest and that I'm straightforward. And they love all of that. But then they get uncomfortable when I don't make eye contact. They criticize me for loving Disney. They get mad at me for not understanding context or social situations. They yell at me for forgetting things. They criticize me for being oversensitive, and they judge me for stimming, which is the equivalent of saying, yeah, I totally accept that you're paralyzed, and then criticizing that person for using a wheelchair. It's not cool. Systemically, ableism is all over the place. Nearly half of police brutality victims are disabled or have some sort of mental illness. And when you combine disability with race, you'll find that the majority of neurodivergent people of color are diagnosed with behavioral issues rather than autism or ADHD. And it's estimated that about 20% of people in prison have some sort of disability. Nearly half of unemployed people in the UK are disabled, and the pay gap for disabled women is twice that of non-disabled women. Being disabled makes it harder to adopt, harder to buy a house, harder to find a job, insurance gets more expensive, it's harder to get married, and countless more barriers. And we live in a society where your worthiness as a human is defined by the amount that you are able to work, and we've all internalized that. Think about all the times that you've chosen to rest rather than do work, and then felt like a terrible person for not being productive. I mean, as a disability advocate, I'm always telling people that your productivity does not equal your worth, but then at the same time, I feel guilty for spending a day painting rocks, even though I didn't have any work to do. The rocks were for a video and I had a migraine, but I still felt worthless because I hadn't done something that society would deem as productive. Disabled people can also be ableist, both to ourselves and to others. I find myself being very accepting towards others and incredibly critical and ableist towards myself. Some examples of that include thoughts like, but what if I'm faking it? Or I'm just trying to get sympathy, or I'm just being dramatic, or I'm causing it. If I just got myself together, I would be fine. It includes smiling through the pain for other people's sake, saying yes to too many things, thinking that I'm taking things from somebody who really needs it, saying that I'm not letting my illness stop me, doing something super ill-advised and then taking a full week to recover, not asking for help, being afraid to state my boundaries, and not taking simple precautions so as not to inconvenience others, thinking that I'm worthless for not doing a million things at a time, feeling guilty for feeling ill, calling myself lazy, and thinking I'm not disabled enough. And the amount of times that I have gotten angry at myself for something that I have absolutely zero control over is far too much. And as a society, we have this idea that anyone who is sick can get better with enough effort and work. And it makes people who work super hard every day just to try to keep afloat feel like maybe we aren't working hard enough and we must be some sort of failure and this illness must be our fault. And I'm saying this both for you and also for myself. You're not lazy. You're not a failure. You are trying hard enough. You are disabled enough. You are allowed to take up space and ask for help. You're allowed to take breaks and do what you need to feel a little less bad. Grinding through illness makes you sicker. This has been proven time and time again. Your productivity is not your worth. You are a worthy person simply because you are a person. So remember that rest is a form of resistance. And if you want to paint rocks all day or just sit and stare at a wall, that's okay. So how can you move forward? How can you be less ableist? Well, it's important to remember that systemically you can't not be ableist. And if you strive for that, you're just gonna keep hating yourself, and that's not productive. So start small. When somebody decides to take the day off work and you get frustrated with them, reevaluate why that is. When you get mad at yourself for resting, reevaluate why that is. Slowly start to reframe your thoughts. For disabled people struggling with internalized ableism, I recommend looking at yourself in the mirror or viewfinder and acting like you're talking to your best friend. Would you criticize them for taking time to rest? Would you criticize them for asking for the food that they aren't allergic to? No, you wouldn't. So start to treat yourself the way that you deserve. Some other basic things that you can do to help include using tone indicators over text like /J for a joke and /S for sarcasm, etc. Adding captions to things is super important, not just for the deaf and hard of hearing, but also for people like me who struggle with auditory processing. I often turn off my captions on YouTube because so many YouTubers don't actually make their captions, and then they're distracting because the auto captions are wrong and the timing is weird. But I want to let you know that I make sure to go through and hand caption all my videos so that doesn't happen. Also, make sure to have written directions for things if you're planning on describing something. So give us the ability to learn both by seeing it, by hearing it, and by reading it. And be open to explaining things to us when we are confused. Not as if you're a teacher and we are the student, but as a friend in a conversation. Generally, just lower the volume of everything. Be very clear and direct. Label foods with their ingredients. I also know that I have a major issue with asking people for my accessibility needs because I'd rather just suffer than make a fuss. So try to understand that when you're making things accessible. On top of that, there are so many times where the accessible option is actually easier for everyone and it doesn't make the disabled person feel weird or left out. So don't be afraid to ask disabled people about accessibility if you don't know where to start. But that being said, accessibility isn't one size fits all, and also we're not here to be your accessibility police. But if you ask nicely and you compensate us for our work, many of us would be down to help. There are also many websites and blogs about making accessible spaces, so do a quick Google and that'll help you to find some stuff as well. And I have a page on ableism and accessibility that covers all of these things because words and audio, and I will link that below. And most importantly, please get rid of strobes and moving lights. They don't need to exist. They don't. Please, they can just stop. Yes, I'm talking to you, theater community. I get it, they look cool, but they also cause sensory overload, migraines, seizures, and countless issues for other people. Also, a lot of non-disableds just don't like them. I have a general rule that any show that I participate in, there are no strobe lights in the production because what's the point of being in a show if I couldn't go see it myself? And unfortunately, this means that I will never be able to comfortably see or be in a rock musical, which is quite sad because I've gotten rather into Jagged Little Pill recently. But I digress. I will make a video about how incredibly inaccessible the theater is at some point. And for those of you who are going to respond, then why is this the field that you have chosen? Sometimes I ask myself that too, but at the same time, the point of theater is to give people the opportunity to see themselves in art, and we have every right to be a part of that. So to the acting professor who told me, the theater isn't meant for people like you, you're not wrong, but it doesn't have to be that way. But anyway, rant complete, back to ableism. All in all, disabled people are people. And I know that you know this, but it's important to reiterate it. We're just people. So treat us that way and be open to learning about our experiences and to changing your language and your space and your outlook on the world. It's really that simple. Anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for learning, and remember that your story isn't over, it is only just begun. I hope you're having a lovely day, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.